Namaskar to everybody. I start with a auspicious shloka, a Mangala Charan. Ganga Taranga Ramaniya Jata Kalapam Gauri Nirantar Vibhushitavama Bhagam Narayana Priyamananga Madapaharam Varanasi Purupatim Bhaja Vishwanatham. I am very happy to be with you all. It's a privilege for me to be invited to address such a very good gathering of diverse scholars, senior scholars, as well as young people, and to address a subject which is not only dear to my heart, but which is of ultimate importance to our country, to our nation. So, as was announced, the topic is making the cultural future of India. Now, this topic has to be approached delicately, but at the same time, it has to be done with a great degree of analysis and frankness, because we are concerned about something extremely important, and that is the future of our nation. What kind of culture do we want that it should have, inheriting culture from the past, making it in the present, and passing it on to our children in the future. So it's a very important task. Now, as you know, there are certain set notions about what is the culture of India and what does Indian culture consist of. And there are notions that what is India? Is it a nation which is, apart from being old, is it a nation which has been made, constructed by others also, or by India itself? Or is it a nation which as a nation came into existence with the British politically uniting the whole of India in the 19th century? From 1857 onwards, because some people suggest that and very strongly argue that. Is it a nation of Hindus? Is it a nation of Muslims also? Is it a nation of various people living in here? And how do all these people look upon its history, and how do they not only solve the conflicts that they have between themselves very often, but how do they solve the conflicts for the future generations so that the future generations are not put to any very deep trouble? And that is a very serious business and a serious concern which has to be handled with a lot of sincerity. Now, there are certain stereotypes about what is India. One stereotype is that कारवां आते गए हिंदुस्तान बनता गया. That India is a place of settlement in which many people have been coming from outside India at various times, with various gaps of centuries or a few centuries, and it is by the coming in, sometimes as invaders, sometimes as migrants, sometimes as bloody, rapacious invaders, sometimes as maybe traders. It is those outsiders who came in, settled here, and eventually made this kind of an amalgamated culture which is India today. Now, this is one very standard view, and this is a view which can be attributed to Jawaharlal Nehru, and it can be called the palimpsest view of India. You know what is a palimpsest view? What is a palimpsest? In ancient times in Mediterranean, they used to write on a book which had leaves made out of leather. And out of a very fine pencil, they would etch out whatever they had to write on a metallic pencil. They would etch out whatever they had to write on the leather leaf. So you write something, then maybe after 100 years, you kind of rub out what you have written with some kind of an eraser, and then write on it again. But in this method of writing, very often what was written earlier could also be read. So maybe 2 or 3 writings could be read. So this is called the palimpsest view of India. That is to say that if you look at Indian history, then behind one set of narrative, there is another narrative of previous people and even previous people. And you can see how India has been made up by foreigners. Now this is the palimpsest view, which has been seriously challenged because first of all, it makes you feel as if nobody belongs here. You know, we are all foreigners. Some are very old foreigners, some are later foreigners, and some are very recent foreigners. And if other foreigners come in today, even by great force, then we cannot deny them any legitimacy because we ourselves are some kind of occupants or captivators of the land. So this is the most serious defect of this view. Unfortunately, this karma aate gaye Hindustan banta gaya, this kind of a palimpsest view has been the view taught in our history books, and for 70 years this has been the national view of the governments that have ruled India after independence. I sometimes call this view not the palimpsest view, but I like to call this view as India as a grand hotel, or Bharat ek sarai, in which everybody comes from somewhere else, lives there and continues to live there. It's a hotel which you don't vacate, but you continue to be very different, you continue to be there, and you never amalgamate, and somehow you go on conflicting. So this is another way of looking at the same thing and pointing out certain defects. Now, the other view, I had already stated that many people think that India as a nation, India as a political entity came into existence only with the British making it so. There were kingdoms, big and small, sometimes even empires at various periods in our history, but there was nothing like a huge, one big, unified, politically unified territory before the British, and hence, as they were the first one to make a territory from Rangoon till almost Iran, or including Afghanistan and all that. So they could be called as the makers of India, or at least the makers of modern India, and the ones who gave it a modern identity and the notion of the nation. So culture has to be seen in terms of these movements, in terms of these paradigms or examples, and we should think about our culture, we should think about our people in these terms. So these are the two major narratives that are talked about. Now what I present always is the third, but a very different view. And my view is that if you look upon the nation as a political territory, then perhaps the nation state never existed anywhere in the world except except 200 years ago it came into existence. So there was no nation state 500 years ago in Europe or in any other part of the world. So the political territory and the idea of a nation as defined in Europe is not to be found anywhere else. It's not to be found in Africa or China or South America or North America. So why do you insist that India should also fall into that paradigm of the modern European nation state, which is largely a linguistic state, the nation of Germans, the nation of French, the nation of English, etc., etc. And India can never be a territory or a nation according to language. It has only provinces. And if you make each province into so-called nation, that there will be 25 or 30 or 40 Indias. And perhaps that is the idea behind arguing that India should be made nation according to the European lines. So anybody can see that that spells disaster for us, and we cannot think of it in cultural terms that way. So that model again is not a model which is part of our history. Now, counter to all these ideas which were talked about, what is the reality? The reality is that India has been some sort of a civilizational or cultural unity for the last 5,000 years. If you go back to very old history, then there is something which you can see, which you can touch, which you can hear, and it is there as evidence for you. This evidence comes to us in two mediums or two media. One is the archaeology, and the other is the texts of our tradition, the Indian texts written in Indian languages. So the texts tell a history of India, indisputable history of India, because there is a growth and a line and a connection between all these texts. And there is also the archaeological evidence. As you know, the archaeological evidence goes back to what is vaguely called the Harappa civilization, sometimes called the Saraswati Sindhu civilization, and it goes back to areas like Mehergarh, which are about 7000 BC, archaeologically proven. So there was civilization, and several things have been found there, 7000 BC, which are still living in Indian culture. What is found in the Harappan culture is something which not only has a continuity down the line of time, but right up to the present time, people are using those things. And you know that very well. The Simanton, the crimson that the women put in their hair, the bangles that they wear, the kind of chariots that were used, the bullock carts that were used, the elephant toys. There are a whole number of things. It's not time for me to go into detail about one aspect of that civilization, but that shows a long, long continuity right up to the modern times. For instance, if you see the idea of the woman, what is the image of the woman in a Harappan image, a Harappan sculpture, some sort of a sculpture? then you find those features and those ideas about what are the essential features of femininity or womanhood throughout Indian sculpture, Indian texts, Indian notions of what is a woman. And this is seen right in the development till the modern times. So, archaeologically, there is evidence before us that there is something called an absolute continuity. Similarly, when you read our texts, right from the earliest available text, which is the Rig Veda, right down to the writings of the present great rishis and intellectuals in the 20th century, then you see again a whole continuity of ideas and a philosophical development. So this continuity of things developing one from another is present there in our philosophical systems. And I shall talk about them a little later. But for the time, for the moment, just note that there is an internal continuity. It is not a continuity which has been given to us by foreign invasions. Certainly, there are many things that came in from outside at different times and they got assimilated here. But that's not the important thing, because that cannot give you continuity. What gives you continuity are certain essential ideas which are capable of being continuous. A large number of diverse people do not make a culture in a hotel. You know, I talked about India as Bharat as Sarai. No hotel is a cultural continuity. No palimpsest is a cultural continuity. It is only a record of certain things that happened at different times, but not a growth, not a development of one idea into another idea, then the same idea developing into a third idea, but in tradition, in parampara. So, to summarize the whole thing that I have said so far, I would like to say that culture is made by a parampara. It is not made by foreign interventions. Continuity is made by internal development. It is not made by outside interventions. Changes are made to which the country has to adjust. But those interventions are not the essential causes of Indian culture. Now this is very important. So I would now urge you to listen to me for a few minutes and allow me to present as to what are those very fundamental ideas which have provided us continuity. All nations do not have continuity. All civilizations do not have continuity. There are great disjuncts between them. For instance, take the great culture of Greece. Greece follows a certain cultural pattern, a religion, gods, goddesses, philosophy, temples, sculpture, up to 2nd century, 3rd century AD. But with the onset of Christianity, there is a big disruption. The whole of the old thing is wiped out. And in modern Greece, you still see the schizophrenia. The Greeks looking on to their pre-Christian past and to their post-Christian present. In India, you do not see such a schizophrenia. In India, you see different influences, diverse influences, but you see a continuity. So, the first thing that gave immense continuity to our civilization was the idea that divinity, that the divine can be with form or it can be formless. It can be savikalpa, it can be nirvikalpa. There can be an image for it, a murti for it, a sign for it, an icon for it, and the divinity can be worshipped without sign. Those who believe in divinity without sign do not go and break the icons. They don't say that those who believe in the icons are non-believers or false believers. They do not reject them. But very, very early in Indian civilization, it is accepted that the divine manifests itself in both ways. Now, this is the most important idea. Because if you see, even to this day, the world is suffering terrible conflict, horrible conflict, because of two major methods of looking at the divine. There is the Judaic tradition consisting of Christianity, Judaism, Christianity and Islam, who insist that any kind of idolatry is a sin. So the world is divided to this day between those who reject Murti Puja and those who accept Murti Puja. This has been one of the major problems, but fortunately in India we solved this problem very early. Now, I don't have time to give you quotations from the Rig Veda, from ancient Indian texts, from medieval Indian texts, etc., but they are well known and you can follow them. So, this is one of the major ideas. Then another idea which has kept India together is a faith in what is called Karmavad, or the theory of karma. The theory of karma is that I am today what I am as a consequence of my past actions, and I shall be tomorrow whatever I shall be as a consequence of my actions from today onwards. So nobody else is responsible for my happiness or unhappiness. I alone am responsible, and I alone will be happy or unhappy because of my action, my karma. Of course, this karma has to follow certain cosmic rules, certain cosmic ideas. It has to follow what has been called in the Rig Veda as Rit, or what even the Greeks used to call Diki, or the law. That is, there are certain fundamental principles of behavior which consists of cosmic patterns and which consists of good action and bad action. So this is another thing. And the third notion in India that has been is dharma. Dharma means something which sustains me. And it operates at various levels. It operates at the level of right and wrong. It operates at the level of whom shall I be devoted to, what shall I be loyal to, what shall I be committed to, what shall I practice as my profession in life, what shall I be honest about. This is the fundamental idea of what is called dharma. So, dharma is something which all Indian philosophic systems have followed. That is, there is a notion in this world which sustains us, and that notion has to be followed through all kinds of action. All Indian philosophies also believe in what is called rebirth. You see, I am trying to draw your attention to the commonness of the huge amount of diversity of belief that we have had in India. The Jains and the Buddhists, the Sikhs, all of these people who had their origin of thought in India, they believed in the idea of rebirth. Because rebirth is fundamentally associated in the idea of karma or action. Now, karma is of course shared by Christianity and Islam as well, because whether you get heaven or you get hell depends upon your karma in the Judaic religions as well. But they do not believe in the return. They only believe in one final resting, whether in hell or in heaven. But they believe in karma. So that is the greatest meeting point between all possible present day philosophical systems that exist in India today. And at the same time, there was also the social order in India, which was called the Varnashram Dharma, which you know too well. But all these ideas were fundamentally based upon the notion of the cosmic law, and that this world which is created has different levels of existence. That is, it has a divine level, it has a material level. This world is not just what we see through the senses. There is much more beyond what we see through the senses, and this is the fundamental difference between the modern materialistic philosophies like Marxism or like cultural Marxism, if you like, or pluralism, just pluralism, which is very prevalent today. So this is the fundamental difference, that life, the cosmos, does not consist of only material reality, but the reality which is beyond the material. In other words, it is the totality of the divinity as well as from which the divinity emanated from, which is the truth. And human beings are just a small part of this one big, huge cosmos. Human beings are not the center of the universe. This world is not anthropocentric. This world is not made for human beings only. It is made for all kinds of creatures, and it is a unity and a balance between all those creatures of diverse kind. Now this is a very radical difference which ancient Indian thought or medieval Indian thought or even modern Indian thought has from, let us say, what would be called certain strains of Western thought, like humanitarianism, in which the human being becomes the center of the universe. So these are some of the features which have kept India as a cultural unity, because its diverse philosophical systems, I don't like to call them religion, because I prefer to use the English translation for the Sanskrit word darshanas. You see, like Bauddha darshan, Jain darshan, Shaiva darshan. Now these are all darshan. Darshan means how you see the universe, how you see the cosmos, how you explain it to yourself, how you relate yourself to that cosmos, how you find your place within the cosmos. This is darshan, and it is philosophical and it is moral and social at the same time. So all Indian darshanas, they have these common features. Of course, in India we had also the Charavak or the materialists who said that no, nothing divine, this body is the ultimate reality, and preservation of this body is the whole and sole purpose of a human being. So, when you look upon the continuity of India in history and you come to modern times, what do you find? You find that India was able to make a relationship with even those religions or philosophical systems like Christianity and Islam that came from outside India, and provide them a place within the Indian system. It was very happily able to provide them a place because they said, okay, you do not believe in Punarjan? Fine. But you do believe in some notion of dharma. Maybe your notion of the divine is a bit different from ours, because you think that there is only one God and every other God other than your God is not true God. But we can talk and negotiate about that, but you still believe that there is a cosmic order and men and women have to live under that cosmic order. So there is a common point. In any case, you are more than welcome to go on following your notions even if you cannot agree with us. And our society is such that it provides space to people of different darshanas. There is nobody who could be called a heathen or a kafir or an outsider, and so India was able to negotiate with the outsiders and provide them a place within its fold. Now this is absolutely important. Why is it that this phenomena did not take place in other parts of the world? You see, we feel very shy of saying this. We talk a lot about modern pluralism, to which I'll come in a minute. But we refuse to understand that it is our fundamental tradition with certain values and notions which makes it possible for others to be included in our fold. Now, I have given you largely the philosophical systems which have been indigenous to India and which have existed for a long time. And these are the philosophic systems which are inclusive. But the modern state, the modern Indian state, which has a constitution based on lines in which the parameters or the principles or the values of life are rather different. And what are those? Those are that there are people with different beliefs who will be treated equally by the state, who, because of their diversity or difference of a certain belief, will not be denied certain fundamental rights. And therefore, the state, the Indian state, the constitution would be equally benevolent, equally beneficial to people of all faiths, diversities, darshanas, etc. This is the modern constitution. But as you can see, that this notion is the fundamental notion of Indian civilization right from very ancient times. Because the diversity of belief has been accepted in India. So, this very notion that will tradition be able to adjust with modernity or not is false. Our tradition already accepts the most modern ideas which various other modern nations have not been able to negotiate. So when people very often ask me that do you think that there is a conflict between India as a Hindu Rashtra or in India as a Hindu civilization and modernity, then I have no problems in saying that the Indian tradition, call it Indian, call it Hindu, call it Sanatan, call it Hindutva, call it whatever you like, but the Indian tradition as a philosophical growth has been so inclusive that it provides a place and a space to everybody. But whosoever believes in that inclusiveness, he or she alone can have a place. Those who do not believe in inclusiveness, those who believe in exclusiveness, those who believe that their God alone is the true God, their way of life is the only true way of life, they obviously will be in a conflict, and that has been the problem for us for a very long time. Now, when you make the cultural future of India, then the culture or practice of art or the practice of the values of life has to rest on certain principles. Let me make it very clear that culture is not dance, music, poetry, drama, painting in exclusion. It is not just craft or technique, that I am a painter, so I'll paint whatever I like. And if I'm painting, then I am an artist. And I should have freedom to make whatever I feel like. Because art is not something which stands by itself. Art always reflects a view of life. It always reflects certain notions of the universe. It always reflects certain approaches towards creation. And hence, it develops certain characteristics. For instance, in Islamic art, they do not make any figure. Of course, those who make figure, the die-hard Islamists call that as non-Islamic art, and they object to it. But by and large, in the Islamic art, human figure is not painted. Why? Because there is a certain vision. There is a certain notion that painting of figure, making of figure is not permitted for human beings. It is the work of the divine only, and human beings cannot do it. So art, any art belonging to a culture is dependent upon the philosophic notions of that culture. So your philosophic notions have to be very wide, they have to be very open, they have to be inclusive, and only then your art shall be inclusive. Your art shall be welcoming to others, and only then your art will be able to reflect the cosmos that you believe in. So, in making of the cultural future of India, we really have to see that parampara, or what we have been constructed over thousands of years, is maintained. And modernity has to be accommodated within it. There will be several things at various junctures of time which would be unhealthy, which perhaps could not be accommodated. At the present time, we find that acute consumerism is something which cannot be accommodated today with any fine, with any sensitive way of living. If you believe in use and throw, then you abuse your body, you abuse your mind, you abuse your environment, you abuse the whole creation around you, you come into conflict with it, you come into misery with it, and life becomes a disease. It is no longer swastha, that is located in itself. It is no longer happy and reconciled with other human beings, other living beings, and the cosmos as a whole. So I think I have been speaking now for 40 minutes, more than 40 minutes, and I shall now like you to ask questions, and from here I can take up one question after another. We have a moderator here with Subhash Thakur. Either he or Firmi, whosoever you have planned, can moderate. Make your questions very small so that I can give proper answers, and others have, sufficient people have time to ask questions.
Indeed, sir, today's lecture was very insightful. We have learned many more new things in it. We developed a new kind of understanding towards the perception of Indian culture. And with these words, now I open this session for questions as well as comments. Dear participants, you can raise your virtual hand, or you may also write in the chat box your questions.
And also please turn on your videos so that I can see your faces. If you can turn on your videos, not your mic, but your videos, then I'll be very happy to see your faces. Especially now in this session.
So I could see few of the raised hands. So
Yeah.
I invite first Jayaprakash sir to put his question.
सर नमस्ते, बहुत ही अंतर्दृष्टिपूर्ण व्याख्यान के लिए आपने अपने लेक्चर में सर दो चीजों की तरफ इंडिकेट किया, एक मॉडर्न प्लूरलिज्म और दूसरा ट्रेडिशनल डाइवर्सिटी के बीच, और एक और महत्वपूर्ण स्थापना आपकी ये थी सर कि हमको मॉडर्निटी को अपने ट्रेडिशनल स्ट्रक्चर में ही एब्जॉर्ब करना होगा। तो मेरा पहला प्रश्न ये था सर कि मॉडर्न प्लूरलिज्म और ट्रेडिशनल डाइवर्सिटी में अंतर क्या है, और क्या अभी हमारे ट्रेडिशनल स्ट्रक्चर में इतनी कैपेबिलिटी है कि जो मॉडर्निटी अलग अलग रूपों में आ रही है उसे हम एब्जॉर्ब कर सकें।
बहुत बहुत आपने एकदम सटीक सवाल पूछे हैं, और जो पहली बात आप कह रहे हैं कि प्लूरलिज्म, मॉडर्न प्लूरलिज्म और भारतीय डाइवर्सिटी में क्या अंतर है, तो आपकी इजाज़त हो तो मैं थोड़ा सा एक, जिसको हम लोग कहते हैं दृष्टांत, एग्जाम्पल लूं। देखिए, जब हम एक राग गाते हैं तो उसमें हर राग में कई स्वर होते हैं, किसी में 5 होते हैं, 6 या 7, और हर स्वर अलग होता है, उसकी सत्ता अलग है। लेकिन वो जब मिलते हैं एक खास ढंग से तो वो राग बनते हैं। उनका एक दूसरे से रिलेशनशिप होना एक मेलोडी या एक राग बनना है। अगर खाली आप उनका उच्चारण करते जाएंगे सा रे गा मा सा, तो राग नहीं बनेगा। तो ये अलग अलग होना और अलग अलग की सत्ता, अलग अलग के लिए, ये प्लूरलिज्म है, मॉडर्न प्लूरलिज्म। और एक दूसरे से संबंधित होना, एक दूसरे से जुड़कर संबंध बनाना, उसमें राग बनाना, रस बनाना, ये परंपरा है भारत की, ये डाइवर्सिटी। अब थोड़ा सा इसको मैं और समझाऊं। देखिए, वेस्टर्न प्लूरलिज्म क्या है, और आप लोग तो सोशियोलॉजी डिपार्टमेंट है आपका, या इस विज्ञान का। आधुनिक प्लूरलिज्म की या सोशियोलॉजी की जो डेफिनेशंस हैं, उसमें संस्कृति की जो डेफिनेशंस हैं, उसमें मैं समझता हूं जो सबसे आधारभूत परिभाषा है या शब्द है, वो है एथनिक, एथनिक ग्रुप, एथनोस। ग्रीक शब्द एथनोस था। ग्रीस में तो उसका मतलब होता था बिरादरी या जाति, लेकिन मॉडर्न एंथ्रोपोलॉजी में और मॉडर्न कॉलोनियल डिस्कोर्स में उसका मतलब होता है एक प्रकार के लोग, एक प्रकार के पीपल। तो जैसे राबड़ी हैं वो एक प्रकार के लोग हैं, राजस्थानी हैं वो एक प्रकार के लोग हैं, लोहार हैं वो एक प्रकार के लोग हैं। तो ये अलग अलग जातियों के जो संकुल हैं, इनको आप एक एंटिटी बनाते हैं, एंथ्रोपोलॉजिकल एंटिटी, और इनको आप एक यूनिट ऑफ थॉट, यूनिट ऑफ सिविलाइजेशन, यूनिट ऑफ लाइफ बना देते हैं। और फिर आप कहते हैं कि ये सब समाज या एक एरिया में रह रहे हैं, समाज में नहीं, क्षमा करें, एक एरिया में, टेरिटरी में रह रहे हैं। अब इनके बीच में आपस में एक रेकन्सिलिएशन होना चाहिए, और उस रेकन्सिलिएशन को डिसाइड करने वाला कौन होना चाहिए? वो इनका एडमिनिस्ट्रेटर होना चाहिए। तो 19वीं शताब्दी में वो एडमिनिस्ट्रेटर कौन होता था? वो कॉलोनाइजर होता था। फ्रेंच कॉलोनाइजर, इंग्लिश कॉलोनाइजर, जर्मन कॉलोनाइजर, बेल्जियन कॉलोनाइजर वगैरह वगैरह। वो इन सब कॉलोनाइज्ड पीपल के एथनिक ग्रुप्स को मैनिपुलेट करके, क्लासिफाई करके, इनको गवर्न करने के लिए, भाई उनका शासन करने के लिए इनको लॉ देता था, इनके लिए कानून बनाता था। कानून उसके अपने देश से लाए गए थे, और उसके कानून जो थे उनकी एक अवधारणा थी। उसके कानून उसके सिविलाइजेशन पर आधारित थे। उसके कानून अब यहां के लोगों को फॉलो करना था। तो उनको बैलेंस करना, उनको एडमिनिस्टर करना, शासन चलाना, ये प्लूरलिज्म है। और यही प्लूरलिज्म आज भी चल रहा है। क्यों? क्योंकि यूरो अमेरिकन थॉट जो है वो कहता है कि भाई हम बताएंगे आपको कि श्रेष्ठ ये है और आपको ऐसे व्यवहार करना है। तो मैंने कुछ साल पहले खबर पड़ी थी कि स्वीडन में भारतीय माँ बाप ने अपने बच्चों को, अपने एक बच्चे को अपने पास बेडरूम में सुला लिया। तो उन्होंने कहा भाई ये तो बहुत गलत है, बच्चे के अधिकारों का हनन हो गया है इसमें, तुम इस तरह से कैसे सुला सकते हो, तुम तो बच्चे पालने लायक नहीं हो, नालायक, हम तुम्हारा बच्चा नहीं लेते हैं। उसका बच्चा ले लिया गया। उनका कानून है कि जो बच्चा पाल नहीं सकता हम उसका बच्चा ले लेंगे, स्टेट ने बच्चा ले लिया। तो अब ये मैंने आपको प्रैक्टिकल उदाहरण दे दिया कि दिस इज हाउ प्लूरलिज्म ऑपरेट्स। भारत का ये प्लूरलिज्म नहीं है, न था कभी। आज बन गया हो तो बात अलग है, क्योंकि हमने कॉलोनियल ऑर्डर को इनहेरिट किया है और हमारा कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल लार्जली कॉलोनियल कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन है। लेकिन परंपरा ये नहीं कहती थी। परंपरा में तो ऐसा सोचे ही नहीं जा सकता था कि राजा आकर कहेगा बच्चा ऐसे नहीं ऐसे पालना है। इतना तो आप भी जानते हैं कि भारतवर्ष में राजा कानून बनाता, धर्म का निर्धारण नहीं करता था। राजा कानून नहीं बनाता था। मनुस्मृति किसी राजा ने नहीं बनाई थी, उसके बनाने वाले और लोग होते थे। राजा खाली एडमिनिस्टर करता था, और एडमिनिस्टर में भी वो जज नहीं होता था। जजेस का एक अलग क्लास होता था। उसका शासन का मतलब था एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन करना, लेकिन जिसमें कानून उसका बनाया हुआ नहीं होता था। बट द यूरोपियन सिस्टम हैज अ वेरी डिफरेंट हिस्ट्री। इन यूरोप laws are made by the parliament. Now what is the parliament? Parliament is a set of people who have taken power away from an earlier administrator. Who was the earlier administrator? The earlier administrator was the church. So the king took the powers away from the church and he said, I will administer. So the Church of England became separate and certain laws were made by the king. It was a struggle between the king and the church. Later on, it was a struggle between the king and the new middle class. And then the class which came after industrialization. Then it was a struggle between the elected people, which is again the people and the king, and we have now a democracy. And in democracy, there are people who have certain ideas about what is right, what is wrong in the European tradition, and they are in conflict with the people of Asia and Africa as to what are going to be the values of life, what are going to be the values of living. So this is the pluralism that operates today. And it is very different from the Indian pluralism, in which certain principles were developed over 3 or 4 millennia at least, of which I gave you an explanation. So I hope I have been able to answer your question.
और मेरे दूसरे प्रश्न के बारे में सर कि
हाँ सर, दूसरा प्रश्न है आपका। दूसरा प्रश्न आपका, ये पहला तो प्लूरल, ये एब्जॉर्प्शन के बारे में है ना?
जी सर।
हाँ, अब देखिए, ये फिनोमिना तो हो ही रहा है। ये आज से नहीं, ये तो हजारों साल से हो रहा है। और मेरा विश्वास, सही कहे तो और गलत कहे तो, मेरा विश्वास ये कि भारत एक बहुत ही सुदृढ़ संस्कृति है, एक सुदृढ़ राष्ट्र कहिए, संस्कृति कहिए, जो कि परिवर्तन को अपने भीतर समेट लेती है, उसके साथ जीती है, और उसको भीतर से अगर वो होता है, उसके भीतर से, ऊपर से नहीं थोपा जाता है यदि, तो वो समृद्ध और अधिक समृद्ध होता है। और ऐसा ही होगा, ऐसा हो भी रहा है। आप देखिए, आप उदाहरण मैं आपको बहुत से दे सकता हूं। आप आधुनिक भारतीय महिला और आधुनिक यूरोपियन महिला को कंपेयर कर लीजिए ना। आप आप तो जेएनयू वाले हैं, आप तो सब जानते हैं कि आधुनिक यूरोपियन महिला की क्या परिकल्पना है, वो कितनी सिक्योर है, कितनी इनसिक्योर है। आधुनिक फेमिनिज्म के डिपार्टमेंट में क्या पढ़ाया जाता है ये तो आप जानते हैं ना। आप ही के यहाँ क्यों, ये जो यानी हार्वर्ड, येल, टोरंटो में क्या पढ़ाया जा रहा है, वहां तो अब मेरी दृष्टि से तो कुछ पढ़ाने के लिए बचे ही नहीं है। वो तो ये पढ़ा रहे हैं कि आप 11 बजे पुरुष हैं, शाम को 5 बजे आप चाहें तो स्त्री हो जाइए, रात को 11 बजे आप फिर पुरुष हो जाइए। आप वो फेमिनिज्म का कोर्स पढ़ाया जाता है यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ टोरंटो में, उसका सिलेबस देख लीजिए खोलकर, उनके कैटलॉग में अभी अभी खोल लीजिए शाम थोड़ी देर में। तो अब जहां के विचार इतने क्या कहें अति समृद्ध हो गए हों, वहां कितना सुख होगा ये भी आप परिकल्पना कर सकते हैं। कितनी सिक्योरिटी होगी महिलाओं के लिए, कितनी वो पुरुषों के दासत्व से मुक्त हो गई होंगी, ये सब आपको स्पष्ट हो जाएगा जब अगर ऐसे विचार पढ़ाए जा रहे हैं। और मैं अतिशयोक्ति नहीं कर रहा हूं, मैं बिल्कुल अतिशयोक्ति नहीं कर रहा। देखिए एक दूसरा उदाहरण दे देता हूं। पश्चिम ने क्रिश्चियन मोनोगमी को सारी दुनिया को प्रचारित किया, लेकिन आज वहां मोनोगमी नहीं है। They still have the law that you can have one wife at a time, but you can have 5 wives in one lifetime. मैं गलत कह रहा हूं या सही कह रहा हूं? So now, do we have a monogamous world or a polygamous world or a super exciting world or a world of great insecurity? Is it just a transitional world? So, you see, the very notion of modernity is now highly questionable. And you come from a university named after Jawaharlal, who peddled modernity to the extent that he made it a habit of every educated Indian to look down upon tradition. And so India today is itself suffering from this peculiar syndrome in which the educated Indian looks down upon tradition, the lower middle class or the poor Indian looks up to tradition, and therefore there is a constant friction between the two. Now, your question was on absorption. So it is for us to decide, what do we have to absorb? What kind of modernity do we have to absorb? Do we have to absorb any kind of modernity that comes? Is every modernity good? Is everything good about technology? I mean, it's so obvious that the challenges of modernity are far, far more than the challenges of tradition. As a matter of fact, the slavery of modernity is far more horrendous than the slavery or the compulsions of tradition. Modernity has given greatest threats to us today. I mean, do you have a greater threat than pornography? Pornography is one of the greatest threats, social threats. And what does modernity have to say on it? I don't think anybody who calls himself a modern thinker has even thought about it or has dared to write anything on it. So I think we have to absorb modernity according to what is useful, what is best, and I think in trying to ascertain what is useful and what is best, our traditional values are more useful than modern values. Now here I'll say just one thing more. Modernity has been defined as very recent West. It is not the classical West. It is not the ancient West. It is not the philosophy of Plato and Aristotle. It is not even the philosophy of Kant. It's post-19th century or post-industrial consumerism which sells for modernity. And I think that is the real threat. Because if you go to something far back in time, in the so-called West, then you come to what we already are talking about, which is parampara. Because there is a parampara of the classical West also. But as you are well aware, no attention is paid to that. There is very little attention paid to even the classical West in India. आपके यहाँ डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ ग्रीक तो है एक छोटा मोटा, जिसकी स्थापना में मैंने एक बहुत बड़ी सहायता की थी सन 2000 में, लेकिन आपके यहाँ डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ लैटिन नहीं है कोई, या आपके यहाँ कोई और एंशिएंट वेस्टर्न लैंग्वेज का डिपार्टमेंट नहीं है. तो मॉडर्निटी वेस्ट भी आप कहाँ से सीखेंगे? फ्रॉम वेयर विल यू लर्न द वेस्ट? Is it just going to be some very current notions of what is humanitarian, what is freedom, what is liberty? Is it going to be all post-Rousseau? I think as Nietzsche said, God is dead. One may say today Rousseau is dead. Yes, next question please.
अगला प्रश्न डॉक्टर बबीता शर्मा जी प्लीज.
Namaskar sir, thank you so much for such insightful lecture. My concern is related to my experience that I had in US. So how they want to raise their children is, not scolding them, not asking them to, stop for something. Children are allowed to ask anything, and I've seen cases where, 10-year-olds are suing their parents just because they are not giving them a bicycle or bike for that matter. So, I was very scared to see these 15-year-olds who were involved in doing drugs, and I was like, if my son is doing something like that, I want to scold him. I actually want that right to scold him. So, it was a very scary moment, and that was one reason why I was not very sure whether I want to raise my child there. So because, there are a lot of restrictions. Even if your child is doing tantrum on the road, you cannot even, say that, you should, very, very firmly, you cannot say that you shouldn't do it. You are just requesting that child, please don't do it, please don't do that. So it was kind of very inhibitory, I being an Indian parent.
I think the West is undergoing a very delicate time. They seem to have exaggerated the notions of freedom to the point of a fetish. You see, there is nothing absolute in this world. Nothing exists just by itself. Whether it is love or sex or freedom or philosophy, it exists in an interrelationship. it exists with checks and balances. I only hope that Euro-American society comes out of this crisis. I would sincerely wish that it happens as soon as possible, but we are not in a position to advise them, because we seem to be more than happy in imitating them. By we, I mean the Anglophonic class in India. You see, India is, the Anglophonic class in India is failing Indians. It is failing the country. So how can this class say something of Indic values to the Americans or to the Europeans? हम अपने ही लोगों के सामने फेल हो गए हैं. हमने ही अपने आप को जानना छोड़ दिया है. तो ये क्राइसिस तो है. आप बिल्कुल सही कह रही हैं. आपने बहुत ही एक प्रैक्टिकल बात सामने रखी.
Sir, another question that I have is,
जी.
so from my experience, the couples that I see around in my family or in my friend circle or all other places, in India, they are supposed to stay together despite the fact that, not every relationship is a healthy relationship. And in West, you have a, choice of, getting away from it, choosing not to be in it. That is easy there and it's not easy here. So I just want to know, staying in a relationship just because, everyone else wants you to be there, is it a good idea?
No, I think what you are talking about is the modern notions of living together.
No. I'm not talking about it. Once a person is married to a particular person, and then after marriage, if they find that things are not working out, and they are still in that marriage because either the female is dependent on the male financially, or they have so much family pressures on them. Because she's not only the wife of that person, she is bhabhi to someone, she is sister to someone or daughter to someone, and to keep all those relations in place, many of the females they sacrifice their own lives and they stay in that toxic relation even if that is not working for them.
Yes, I appreciate what you say and I agree with you. Now this is an unfortunate situation, but you cannot make a general rule out of it.
Yes.
The only rule or only kind of a rule of thumb that they can be is this, that you have to see if you are really benefiting others. Because I think by killing yourself, by killing I mean metaphorically, you cannot for very long help others either.
Yes.
So one has to see if one can really help others and still maintain an inner integrity even though one is sacrificing, or is one creating more problems. Because if you are not strong enough, then in the long run you will create more problems, even to those whom you think you are helping.
Well, I have heard from females of my mother's age, they saying that, I spent 40 years of my marriage just serving my husband, my children and their, the extended family. So everything I did was for them and nothing for me. They lose their own life.
Self-esteem.
Yeah.
You see, this is of course true, and this is because the notion of what is a woman's duty or what is a woman's married life in modern India is again cut off from all notions of what is a good wife.
Yeah, in a good wife.
In classical terms,
Yes.
you see, when I say that the classical world has a lot more of freedom to offer us, then the classical world said that a woman should be artistic, that she should be educated, that even though she is a housewife, she should have all the opportunities of education.
But it is
But
not
this was
true.
not followed. It was not followed in modern India, and or let us say in a period before that, for whatever reason, that is historical. But that kind of a life which that kind of an ideal which we have constructed about a dutiful wife in modern times is not something in keeping with our notions of what is a wife, traditionally speaking.
Sir, to tell you,
You see, let me tell you what a wife is supposed to be.
Yeah.
आपको मैं एक संस्कृत का पद सुनाता हूँ. कार्येषु मंत्री.
Yes, sir. Huh?
हाँ. If you have to do something, then you must consult your wife. Your wife is the best consultant. Karadeshu dasi. Karadeshu is once you have decided that we together are going to do this thing, we as a family are going to do this thing, then she must execute it just as somebody under your service executes. That is, it should be executed. Shayaneshu Rambha. She should be like an apsara in bed. Shayaneshu Rambha Bhojyeshu Mata. She should be able to feed everybody like a mother. Dharmanukula. She must follow dharma, not follow the husband only. Because if the husband follows adharma, then she is not supposed to follow him. Dharmanukula Kshamaya Dharitri. She should be forgiving. Forgiving to everybody. So these are the 6 Shadgunanavita Bharya Dhanyanavante. So this is the ideal.
फिर यहाँ मैं
तो अब भारतीय आइडियल तो ये है. देखिए अब इसमें अब आज की अगर परिस्थिति कुछ और है तो वो हमारे मूल्य नहीं है.
I think Dr. Akhtar Alam has also raised the source.
just
Yeah.
one thing. I just want to ask, where is the male sequel of this sloka? I have been reading this. This puts on a lot of
देखिए ये these are many shlokas, thousands of them in Sanskrit, which are called anonymous.
Yeah, so इसका male sequel भी होना चाहिए actually. There is no responsibility on the male part, and all the responsibility.
No. This is not a look. Just थोड़ा सा, just try to think. This is talking about what a wife should be. Now,
Yeah, what a husband.
now
That-
when you talk about what a husband should be, then there are shlokas on that also.
Yeah, I don't know about.
You see, उसके बारे में भी श्लोक में क्या होना चाहिए? That what are the duties of a husband?
From female, sir.
हाँ?
Thank you. Question is the
Sir, why society has so much expectations from females?
Yeah, I have
देखिए
no-
ऐसा है, हमने ये एक सिंड्रोम बना लिया है कि अगर महिलाओं के बारे में कोई श्लोक है तो हमने सब उन्हीं पर छोड़ दिया. ऐसा तो नहीं है. अब आप देखिए एक हिंदू मैरिज में क्या सप्तपदी होती है, तो उसमें पत्नी भी तो कहती है कि आप ये चीज प्रॉमिस करिए तब मैं शादी करूंगी.
But sir, this is not true for the working female. Those saptapadi is not updated to the working.
See, just a minute, please. Saptapadi is applicable to whosoever does a Hindu marriage. Now, whether you practice a Hindu marriage or you don't practice it, That's a different situation. I'm talking of what is the social ideal. Now, what is practiced by a given individual or a set of people, that's a different matter. You can't get around by saying that what is practiced is the real thing and what is said in books is all a product by evil Brahmins. अभी एक हमारा syndrome बन गया है. Now this is actually a kind of a guilt we are living in. And this guilt was willfully inculcated in our education system in the last 50 years. We were made to denigrate everything which was ancient and classical and good and worthwhile. And we were asked to blindly follow notions of modernity which we now know have come to a disastrous precipice.
सर इसमें मैं कुछ कहना चाहूंगी जो हमारे पुराने वेद और जो श्लोक लिखे गए हैं वो जनरली किसी मेल के द्वारा ही लिखे गए हैं. तो आज तक तो कभी ऐसा हुआ नहीं कि हमने कभी सुना हो कि किसी फीमेल ने कुछ ऐसा लिखा.
अब मीरा तो मेल नहीं थी.
तो ऐसा हो सकता है कि कभी फीमेल पर्सपेक्टिव देखा ही नहीं.
नहीं, देखिए बात सुनिए, मीरा मेल नहीं थी. अच्छा सुनिए, अब और वेद की बात सुन लीजिए. वेद में जो ऋषिकाएं हैं और कोई 11 ऋषिकाएं हैं तो वो तो स्त्रियां थी. एक सबसे बड़ी समस्या ये है कि क्लासिकल इंडिया के बारे में एक बहुत ही इनकम्प्लीट इंफॉर्मेशन वाली हैंडबुक बना ली गई. एक ऐसी हैंडबुक बना ली गई है कि जिसमें मतलब आपने बहुत कुछ छोड़ दिया और कुछ कूड़ा कबाड़ा रख लिया और अब आप कहते हैं कि यही सच्चाई थी. और आप लोगों की उम्र तो बहुत कम है, लेकिन मैंने ये हैंडबुक लिखती हुई देखी है और मैं उन कलमों को और उन हाथों को जानता हूं. अब तो ज़्यादातर उनमें से गुजर भी गए, लेकिन ये हैंडबुक लिखने वाले लोग वो हैं. एक साहब अभी गुजरे, डीएन झा उनका नाम था. तो असलियत ये है, मेरा आपसे केवल एक कहना है, आप खुद पढ़िए.
मैं वेद पढ़ती हूँ एंड इनिशिएशन दैट आई हैव रेड व्हाई ज्वेलरी क्यों फीमेल्स को दिया गया एंड व्हाई दे वर सपोज्ड टू स्टे एट होम. And what I find at their base is kind of disturbing a little.
Is what?
पर्पस ये था कि बाहर मत जाओ नहीं तो कोई आपकी ज्वेलरी ले लेगा.
नहीं, ऐसा कहीं नहीं लिखता. ऐसा कहीं कोई मुझे पता नहीं आपने कहाँ पढ़ लिया और किसने आपको ये सब पढ़ा दिया. ये ऐसा कहीं कोई there is no such. And jewelry, and do you know something that jewelry is a technical term called kanya. It is called Stri Dhan, and Stri Dhan was something which was with women all the time as their property, and it could not be legally taken away from them. Now, if you want to read and hear more about this, you can see some of my videos on Manusmriti and on Kama Shastra. They are available on my YouTube channel. There are about 30-40 videos and you will get extensive references and descriptions and legal things. अब और लोगों के सवाल ले लें, कुछ और लोगों के सवाल. Should we take some more questions, please?
Sir?
Yeah.
Sir?
Yeah.
Sir, I just wanted to add, I don't want to make it very controversial or something. मुझे हमेशा एक बात लगती है कि सीता जी को अग्नि परीक्षा देने के लिए बोला गया था.
हाँ जी.
राम जी भी तो उतने दिन उतने बाहर थे, उनका भी कुछ पता नहीं था, तो उनको क्यों नहीं अग्नि परीक्षा देनी पड़ी?
नहीं, बाहर कहाँ थे?
मतलब वो कहीं भी थे, सीता जी के पास तो नहीं थे. जैसे सीता जी उनके पास नहीं थी तो उनको अग्नि परीक्षा देने के लिए कहा गया.
देखिए,
तो सीता जी भी तो कह सकती थी कि आप भी मुझसे इतने दिन दूर थे तो आप कहाँ क्या कर रहे थे, तो आप भी अग्नि परीक्षा दीजिए.
नहीं, देखिए बात सुनिए।
सर ये मेल डोमिनेटेड सोसाइटी है,
अरे-
ये तो मानना पड़ेगा सर, और मेल डोमिनेटेड ही राइटिंग्स हैं।
देखिए मैं आपको दो बातें बताना चाहता हूं। एक है इतिहास जो कि सबके सामने है। अब इतिहास में मेल डोमिनेशन था या मेल डोमिनेटेड सोसाइटी थी, इसका निर्णय तो आप किन चीजों को डोमिनेशन का अधिकार बनाते हैं ये उसके ऊपर डिपेंड करता है। किसके हाथ में पैसा होता है, पावर होती है। अगर आप इसका एक प्रॉपर एनालिसिस करें तो ये सारा खुद में एक क्रिएटेड नैरेटिव है कि ये मर्दों के ही हाथ में सब होता है।
सर ऐसे भी आप देखें तो बायोलॉजिकली, फिजियोलॉजिकली एंड साइकोलॉजिकली
हाँ जी।
भगवान हमें शायद ऐसा बनाया ही है कि हम झुक जाते हैं। ये भी एक रीजन होता है कि
ये
हमारे
कौन कह रहा है?
कारण वहाँ है।
ये कौन कह रहा है भाई? देखिए यहाँ इतने मर्द बैठे हैं, हर समझदार मर्द जानता है कि कब झुक जाना चाहिए पत्नी के आगे।
अब ये
अब देखिए बात सुनिए, देखिए बात सुनिए। कोई शादी चल सकती है, कोई परिवार चल सकता है जब तक एक दूसरे के आगे स्त्री और पुरुष न झुके। नहीं, ये देखिए मैं आपसे बहुत सिंसियरली बात कर रहा हूं। You cannot have a relationship unless you have give and take. And even so-called highly uneducated people know this. Even animals know this. So this whole discourse of male-dominated society can be something which is created by a particular class of people who want even women to behave in a certain fashion. अब मैं आपसे ब्लंटली एक सवाल पूछता हूं। When you talk of feminism and liberalism today, are you able to give women a role model which is entirely different from a male model? I mean, you want to become a fighter pilot like a male. You want to become a surgeon like a male. You want to become a prime minister like a male. तो जब आपकी आइडेंटिटी एक मेल की तरह से आपको बनाने के लिए कहा जा रहा है, तो ये डिस्कोर्स मेल और फीमेल के बारे में नहीं है, ये पावर शेयरिंग के बारे में। और ये पावर शेयरिंग क्यों हो रहा है? क्योंकि आप चाहते हैं कि औरतें वही काम करें जो मर्द करें, और जिस गुलामी में मर्द लगे हुए हैं उस गुलामी में और ज्यादा औरतें लग जाएं। यानी जो कॉरपोरेट आज 50,000 मर्दों को एम्प्लॉय किए हुए हैं, उसमें वो 25,000 औरतें भी एम्प्लॉय कर ले और वो सारी औरतें वैसे ही काम करें। वो 2 घंटे बस में बैठकर दफ्तर जाएं, 2 घंटे बस में बैठकर दफ्तर से लौटे, वो बिल्कुल वही करें जो कि आदमी करता है, और वो इक्वालिटी कहना है।
इसमें अगर कुत्ते का रोल ये है, आपका कुत्ता अगर खाता
जी हाँ, खैर हाँ, आगे बढ़िए, आगे बढ़िए। देखिए मैं जो बात कह रहा हूं जरा थोड़ा ध्यान से सुनिए। I'll be very happy to listen to anybody who tells me that these are the special quality of women, and social influence and power should be given to them to execute these qualities and implement them in human society. Then I will say you are talking of true feminism, because you are bringing something feminine which males don't have. But if you are asking women to become like men, तो ये तो वही जो है जो गांधी बाबा करते थे। गांधी जी ने भी तो कस्तूरबा से कहा ना कि भाई तुम बिल्कुल मेरे जैसी हो जाओ, ब्रह्मचारिणी हो जाओ। तो ये असलियत में नोशंस जो हैं आप उनको देखिए, ये पावर स्ट्रक्चर का चक्कर है और अगर इससे हमें बाहर आना है तो वी हैव टू टॉक अबाउट व्हाट इज द स्पेशल क्वालिटी ऑफ ए फीमेल। इसके बारे में कभी लेक्चर रखिए, मैं अपने विचार प्रकट कर सकता हूँ। मेरे पास बहुत सारी बातें हैं कहने के लिए कि समाज में ऐसी कौन सी चीज़ें हैं जो औरतें सचमुच मर्दों से कहीं ज़्यादा अच्छी कर सकती हैं, और उसको उस अपॉर्चुनिटी को बनाने के लिए हमें समाज में कुछ इंस्टीट्यूशंस बनाने चाहिए। तब तो मैं कहूँगा कि दिस इज फॉर द बेनिफिट ऑफ विमेन एंड सोसाइटी एज अ होल।
सर आई थिंक ये हमें ये नहीं कोई जरूरत है करने की कि हम मेल की तरह बन जाएं, बल्कि ये चीज हमारे सिस्टम में तो फिर बहुत बदलाव आ गया। मैं टाइम पहले की बातें कर रही हूँ जो मम्मी वगैरह थी, तो मैं ये कह रही हूँ कि इंस्टेड ऑफ दैट कि अब मैं जैसे अपने बेटे हैं मेरे छोटे छोटे, उनको मैं लड़कियों की तरह सब कुछ समझा के रेस कर रही हूँ जैसे वो हर काम अपना कर पाए। तो ये चीजें पहले हमारे समाज में नहीं थी, अब हम चेंज कर रहे हैं। तो वाई टू बिहेव लाइक अ मेल, इंस्टेड हमको एक अपनी पहचान दे दी जाए कि हम अपनी आइडेंटिटी अपनी है, मेरी आपकी आइडेंटिटी अपनी है। दैट्स द ओनली इशू।
मैं तो यही कह रहा हूँ,
एवरी पर्सन
मैं तो आपसे यही कह रहा हूँ कि फेमिनिन आइडेंटिटी क्या है, पहले इसे तो डिसाइड कीजिए ना। क्योंकि जो वेस्टर्न डिस्कोर्स
एक और चीज मैंने नोटिस किया है
क्योंकि जो वेस्टर्न डिस्कोर्स ऑफ फेमिनिज्म है, एक मिनट बात पूरी कर लूं, जो वेस्टर्न डिस्कोर्स ऑफ फेमिनिज्म है वो तो मेकिंग विमेन इनटू स्मॉल मेन है। देखिए, आप इसमें कुछ ज्यादा अकल लगाने की जरूरत नहीं है। उन्होंने तो आपसे आपके कपड़े भी छीन लिए, उन्होंने तो यूनिसेक्स क्लोथ्स बना दिए, और वो यूनिसेक्स क्लोथ्स क्या है? मेल क्लोथ्स हैं। और आज आप उन मेल क्लोथ्स को पहनकर सोचती हैं कि आप मॉडर्न हो गई, और वो निहायत गंदे सिर्फ 2 रंगों के काले और ब्लू कपड़े होते हैं। आपकी जो पूरी की पूरी संपदा थी, आपकी जो रंगीनियत थी, आपकी जो खूबसूरती थी, वो सब उन्होंने हर ली। और आज आप दौड़ रही है कि ये नीले कपड़े में 10 गुने पैसे देके खरीद लूं। यानी मैं तो देखिए, मैं तो उस औरत को भी जिसको जेल की सजा हो गई हो, उसको ये कपड़े पहनाना नहीं चाहूंगा, क्योंकि ये तो मेरी निगाह में ये तो उसके स्त्रीत्व का पूरी तरह से हरण है।
सर, मैं एक चीज बस बोलना चाहूंगी जो मैं फील करती हूँ कि औरत की दुश्मन ज्यादा मुझे लगती है रादर देन मेल को हम जो ब्लेम करते रहते हैं। क्योंकि मैं हमेशा फील करती हूँ बीइंग अ वुमन वी आर डिफरेंट व्हेन वी आर सिस्टर्स, व्हेन वी आर डिफरेंट व्हेन वी आर सिस्टर-इन-लॉ, वी आर डिफरेंट व्हेन वी आर डॉटर्स, वी आर डिफरेंट व्हेन वी आर डॉटर इन लॉ।
नहीं मैडम,
कीप ऑन ब्लेमिंग मेल, दैट आई रियलाइज।
नहीं ऐसा देखिए क्या है,
जो आया है ना सर डोमिनेशन का, दैट्स बिकॉज़ हम लोग बहुत अत्याचार सही है। दैट इज व्हाई वी आर कमिंग ओवर, बहुत पैशनेट होके हम बाहर आ रहे हैं।
नहीं, मैं आपसे
चाह रहे हैं अग्रेसिव होके।
मैं आपसे एक बात पूछूं, मैं आपसे एक बात पूछूं, देखिए मैं आपसे एक बात पूछूं,
जेंडर सेंसिटिव नहीं होते सारे।
नहीं एक मिनट, ये जो आइडिया ऑफ फेमिनिन लिबरलिज्म है, ये किसका बनाया हुआ है? ये माफ कीजिए, ये आपका बनाया हुआ नहीं है। मैं औरतों को इसका दोषी नहीं मानता, मैं इसको 100% कॉरपोरेट कंज्यूमरिस्ट बिजनेस टाइकून्स को दोषी मानता हूं, जो सारे के सारे मेल हैं। ये सारा भ्रम फेमिनिज्म का जो क्रिएट किया गया है, ये कॉरपोरेट हाउसेस के द्वारा किया गया है टू क्रिएट ए वर्क फोर्स which is totally unfeminine, which is totally inhuman, and which subjugates and submits to the corporate slavery. अच्छा, अगर ऐसा नहीं होता तो औरतों के रंगीन कपड़े हम मर्दों को भी प्रिस्क्राइब किए जाते। वो तो हुआ नहीं, उल्टा हो गया। हमारे काले और नीले कपड़े आपको प्रिस्क्राइब कर दिए गए, क्योंकि वो काले और नीले कपड़े पहनकर आप फैक्ट्री में ज्यादा अच्छा काम कर सकती हैं।
दैट इज अबाउट कन्वीनियंस। साड़ी रोज पहनने के लिए 2 घंटा चाहिए होता है कॉलेज जाने।
2 घंटा? माफ कीजिए,
साड़ी पहनना
माफ कीजिए, आप मेरे से सीख सकती हैं साड़ी 2 मिनट में पहनना। मैं आपको सिखा सकता हूँ 2 मिनट। मैं देखिए मैं धोती पहनता हूँ, मैं अक्सर धोती पहनता हूँ और 2 मिनट लगते हैं धोती बांधने में, और मैं कार चलाता हूँ बड़े आराम से धोती बांध के। अब वो जरूरी नहीं है कि आपको ऐसी धोती पहननी है कि जो फैली फैली फिरे। जरा थोड़ा सा सोचिए, हिंदुस्तान में आज से सिर्फ 200 साल पहले सारे हिंदुस्तान में धोती पहनकर लोग तलवार चलाते थे और फौजें लड़ाइयां करती थी। तो भागना, दौड़ना, उछलना, कूदना, ये सब होता था ना। देखिए ये माफ कीजिए, ये प्रचार का हिस्सा है, कन्वीनियंस नहीं है। कन्वीनियंस तो आप बनाएंगे ना अपने कपड़े कन्वीनियंट। Why do you want to throw the baby with the bath water? ये आपको बेच दिया उन्होंने कि जीन्स पहन लो, ये कन्वीनियंट है। आप अकल लगाइए।
Sir, we are running out of time, so
Yeah.
and we have other participants also waiting.
Yes,
so
please.
Next question will be from Dr. Akhtar Alam.
Yes,
Please go ahead.
yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Subhas, and thank you very much, sir. एक्चुअली टाइम ज़्यादा हो गया, मुझे बहुत कुछ पूछना था और बहुत कुछ आपके आंसर से बहुत कुछ मिल गया। मुझे सिर्फ इतना शॉर्ट में मैं बोलना चाहता हूँ कि आखिर हमारे जैसे परंपरा है, दूसरे सभ्यता है, उसको हमने भारत में वेलकम किया है और अभी इतना ज़्यादा एम्फसाइज क्यों कर रहे हैं? ऐसा तो नहीं कि हम इसके थ्रू से हम दूसरों की आज़ादी पर दखल अंदाजी कर रहे हैं।
नहीं, देखिए क्या हो गया है।
एक मिनट सर, अगर कुछ दुनिया में अच्छा हो रहा है,
हाँ,
वो ऑब्वियसली आएगा ही, आप उसको रोक नहीं सकते, हम उसको रोक नहीं सकते, कोई उसको भी रोक सकता। दुनिया के किसी भी कोने में कुछ अच्छा होता है तो दूसरी दुनिया में पहुंचता जरूर है।
देखिए मैंने शुरू में कहा कि मॉडर्निटी में हमें वो लेना है जो अच्छा है। अगर वो अच्छा नहीं है तो वो नहीं लेना है, और वो हिंदुस्तान में किसी को भी नहीं लेना है। क्योंकि अगर वो एक के लिए बुरा है, हिंदुस्तान में एक वर्ग के लिए बुरा है, एक रीजन के लिए, भाषा के लिए, संप्रदाय के लिए बुरा है, तो सबके लिए बुरा है। वो ऐसा नहीं हो सकता कि इसके लिए अच्छा है और उसके लिए बुरा है। क्योंकि ये डाइवर्सिटी की जो हमने नोशन बनाई है अब मॉडर्न टाइम्स में, वो खुद में गलत है। हमने ये मान लिया है कि कुछ लोगों को विशेष रूप से अधिकार दे देना, ये उनका ध्यान रखने का हिस्सा है। तो मॉडर्न चीज जो भी, अगर जैसे अब ये हमने ड्रेस की बात की, तो अगर मॉडर्न सो कॉल्ड जीन्स एंड सो कॉल्ड कंज्यूमरिस्टिक ड्रेसेस को छोड़ना है और आपको ट्रेडिशनल ड्रेस पे जाना है, तो ट्रेडिशनल ड्रेस की तो भारत में इतनी वैरायटी है कि लोग जो पहनते आए हैं, जहां के जो लोग वो पहने, उससे अच्छी बात क्या होगी? भाई कोई साड़ी पहने, कोई शरारा पहने, कोई सलवार पहने, कोई क्या कहते हैं पंच कच्छम पहने, कोई ये इतने सारे तरह तरह की ड्रेसेस होती हैं, लहंगा पहने, कोई घाघरा पहने। मैं तो मोदी जी को एक चिट्ठी लिखने वाला हूं कि मंगल और बृहस्पति को किसी सरकारी दफ्तर में वेस्टर्न क्लोथ्स पहनना अलाउड नहीं होगा, और जो आपकी दादी पहनती थी, दादा पहनते थे, वो पहनकर आइए। जहां के भी आप हैं, जो भी आपका है, उसको पहनिए, अपनाइए। मैं तो इस वैरायटी की बात कर रहा हूं, मैं तो इस परंपरा की बात कर रहा हूं। आपके दादा अगर चूड़ीदार पजामा पहनते थे वो पहनिए, अगर वो धोती पहनते थे, लुंगी पहनते थे, कुछ भी वेष्टी पहनते थे तो वो पहनिए। ये भारत में हमें इतनी शर्म क्यों है कि किसी आईएएस अफसर को भारतीय कपड़ा पहनना अलाउड नहीं है? ऐसा कैसे हो गया भाई? 70 और यही आईएएस अफसर जैसे ही रिटायर होते हैं वैसे ही आजादी की बात करने लगते हैं कि भारत में आजादी नहीं है। भाई जब तुम आईएएस थे तब तो तुमने ये तक नहीं कहा कि मैं दफ्तर में एक दिन कुर्ता पजामा पहनकर आ जाऊं क्या? तब तो इतनी आजादी नहीं मांगी आपने, और अब आप रिटायर हो गए और आप राजनीति में आना चाहते हैं तो आप कह रहे हैं भारत में आजादी खत्म हो गई। देखिए मैं तो बड़ी प्रैक्टिकल आजादी की बात कर रहा हूं, और मैं उस आजादी की बात कर रहा हूं जिससे किसी दूसरे की आजादी पर कोई असर ना हो, क्योंकि सेंसिटिव समाज वही होता है। सेंसिटिव समाज वही होता है जो ये पहले सोचता है कि मेरे आचरण से किसी दूसरे को तो कोई नुकसान नहीं हो रहा।
क्षमा चाहते हैं लेकिन अगला
हाँ,
प्रश्न फिर है
जी हाँ, जी हाँ।
दिल्ली से, तो प्लीज गो अहेड।
Hello, am I audible, sir?
Yes.
Thank you so much, sir, for this wonderful lecture. Sir, I would like to ask you that don't you think that particular gender stereotyping would be detrimental on the personal level as well as on the national level?
Yes, certainly. You see, I mean, as I said very bluntly, we have not decided as to what are those real channels of expression, effective channels of expression that you have to give to women.
Yes.
हमने पहले इसका निर्णय तो कर ले। हम कहते हैं, you know, if you give 33% seats in Lok Sabha, then that is enough. Now that is not true. That's not going to bring you freedom, and that is nothing to give to women. The whole discourse of feminism has to certainly see as to what would be the benefit to women. Let's talk about that. Just giving them more jobs. अगर आप 33% सीटें दे देती हैं पार्लियामेंट में, तो उन्हीं लोगों की बहू बेटियां आएंगी जो पहले से ही बैठे हैं।
Social inequality would be increasing.
Yes, the class.
Yes.
The class would become more powerful.
Yes.
तो उसके नॉर्म्स होने चाहिए कि आप उन महिलाओं को देंगे जिन महिलाओं का समाज में 8 या 10 साल कुछ काम है जिसके बारे में सब जानते हैं, जिन्होंने सच्चे माने में सेवा की है, आप उनको देंगे। चाहे आप 50% को दें, चाहे आप 60% को दें।
Yes.
क्राइटेरिया तो ये होना चाहिए। क्राइटेरिया ये नहीं कि हमें 20% 25% को देना है। ये सारी ये देखिए, ये सारी चीजें सोचने की हैं। स्टीरियोटाइप बहुत किस्म के बन गए हैं। जैसे रिजर्वेशन में स्टीरियोटाइप है। अब एक आदमी आईएएस अफसर होता है, उसके बच्चे को भी कोटे में दाखिला मिल जाता है आईएएस में।
Yes, sir.
अब ये कोई जस्ट है? भाई आपने तो किसी दूसरे के हाथ से छीन लिया ना, आपने तो ये दुरुपयोग किया।
सर अभी तो जस्टिस टाइम ओके ओके
थैंक यू।
हाँ जी, next question.
थैंक यू सर।
ये जो थैंक यू सर फॉर ये जो क्वेश्चन आंसर का सिलसिला चल रहा है
जी,
तो जिस तरह से आप जवाब हमें दे रहे हैं, संतुष्ट कर रहे हैं, तो ये क्वेश्चन और बढ़ाती जा रही है। तो लेकिन ये है कि समय का अभाव है, और मैं सारे पार्टिसिपेंट से रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा कि पर्सनल ईमेल आईडी या फोन पर जो भी बचे हुए प्रश्न हैं वो पूछ सकते हैं।
जी हाँ, देखिए,
पहले मैं ये जी सर,
I am available if you want to spend another 10-15 minutes questioning. It's fine with me.
सर असल में दूसरा सेशन भी स्टार्ट होना है
हाँ,
ब्रेक के बाद।
आपका टाइम टेबल जो है वो
समय
फिर
की अभाव है हमारे पास।
your timetable would get disturbed, right?
So before I end this session, some quick comments from Dr. Firmi Bodo ma'am, then I would like to end.
Yeah.
Doctor.
Sir, thank you so much, sir, for taking each and every question so, open-heartedly, sir. I mean, from HRDC, JNU, I really thank you for giving us your valuable time. At the end, everybody has shared their opinion. I just wanted to say, sir, that somewhere maybe we are becoming less sensitive to understand each and every part of our society. We have to be very sensible and at the same time sensitive. I do think that all the problem will be resolved. So thank you, sir.
आप सबका धन्यवाद. I am very happy to be with you all and I thank you again. And